countdown to the end of the truce hours before the 5-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is to expire. As part of the efforts, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is set to meet with Hamas's political head Khalid Mash'al in Qatar. In Iraq, Kurdish forces step up their offensive against the Islamic State, backed with U.S. warplanes. Iraq security spokesman said the Mosul Dam has been completely liberated from the Sunni extremist group. The strife surrounding the murder of Missouri teen Michael Brown continues as the state's governor asks the National Guard to help bring calm back to Ferguson.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening. As we speak, it's exactly 4 hours before the 5-day truce between Israel and Hamas is set to expire. And once again, questions and uncertainty are defining the day. One senior Israeli official told I-24 News that all options are still on the table and that an agreement doesn't appear likely. Netanyahu continues to emphasize that if rocket fire will resume, Israel will react forcefully. Meanwhile, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is set to meet with Hamas political chief Khalid Mash'al in Qatar. Also today, Israel's Internal Security Service claims it uncovered and disbanded Hamas cell based in the West Bank and Jerusalem that had plans to topple the Palestinian president to take control of the West Bank. And for the next 90 minutes, we will be with our correspondents in the field at the Gaza border, Shai Ben Ari, Amjad Abu Arafi, and Julia Ganancia, and also from Ashkelon we will be with Shachar Peled and Elza Morges. But before we start our discussion, let's look at the last 24 hours. Netanyahu, ya Japan!
המשלחת הישראלית לקהיר פועלת מיומה הראשון תחת הנחיה ברורה מאוד, לעמוד בתוקף על צורכי הביטחון של מדינת ישראל.
نحن نريد اتفاق يستجيب لمطالب شعبنا الفلسطيني، ولذلك نؤكد أن حماس جاهزة للتعاطي مع كل الخيارات.
כל עוד לא ישוב השקט, החמאס ימשיך לספוג מכות קשות מאוד.
Yes, and with me on set is Moti Krista, former deputy head of the Negotiations Management Center of the Israeli Prime Minister's Office. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. And former Israeli ambassador to Egypt, Eli Shaked. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. So we're just getting reports that the Israeli delegation left Cairo, and Palestinian sources are saying that both sides agreed on the extension of the ceasefire. Gentlemen, help me understand, what Israel trying to gain right now today in the last, when we're counting down to 12 o'clock Jerusalem time?
Well, Lucy, there's a very famous Homer Simpson quote.
When you start a sentence with a very famous Homer Simpson quote,
yeah,
okay.
He says, you know, when I don't know what to do, I do what I know. and actually, we started to see a pattern. There is a certain stalemate in the negotiations, and both parties do not want to lose points vis-a-vis the Egyptians. So the only way, or the minimum level of not satisfying or of not disappointing the Egyptians would be to extend the ceasefire. It won't be, we will not be able, Israel will not be able to continue this process for long, because in the meantime, what happens on the ground is that the Palestinian population, as we saw in the news report, the Palestinian population go back to what they know, which is tacit support of Hamas. And I think Israel has a very short window of opportunity that the Palestinian population in Gaza could be turned into supporting of Fatah and any Abu Mazen forces settlement or introduction into the Gaza Strip.
Let me introduce to our viewers you started with Homer Simpson. I will introduce to our viewers the Israeli phrase that says, "Yeh beseder." It will be okay. Is it like in Israel's benefit to extend day after day after day and to say, okay, it will be okay. In 2 days, it will be okay. In 5 days, it will be okay.
Well, here you put me in a certain corner because it is not in Israel's benefit. However, it seems that it is in Prime Minister's benefit. And I'll tell you why. Prime Minister Netanyahu's political benefit. I'll tell you why. Basically, there's only one way to defeat Hamas. So if the political agenda is to defeat Hamas, you need, in the balance of power of the Middle East or the Palestinian level, the only way to defeat Hamas is to strengthen Abu Mazen. I'm not sure that this is Netanyahu's political interest to strengthen Abu Mazen. So if we look from Netanyahu's political perspective, he would prefer this uncertainty or unclear situation in the south, definitely until September 1st, this is a point of decision, that he will try to play, strengthen Hamas, not too strong. At least he will have someone that he could blame, and at the same time someone who will be able to control the Gaza Strip. As long as he doesn't need to strengthen Abu Mazen and provide a political victory to Abu Mazen, whether this is in Israel's benefit or not, this is for the public to judge.
So before we'll get you on what you just said to keep the status quo in the Gaza Strip. So we introduced the viewers with Homer Simpson and the Israelis. Let's introduce the viewers to a word that the Palestinians, maybe our world knows better. It's inshallah. If God wants, it will be okay. If God wants, we will reach an agreement. Is it in Egypt's benefit to actually say, okay, in 5 days, in 2 days, in 1 month? Is it what Egypt really wants?
No, Egypt would like to have a kind of an agreement according to its basic principles that were laid out to all the parties concerned more than a month ago now. They didn't move an inch from their basic ideas and their interests. For Egypt, it makes no difference whether it will end tonight or 2 months from now. As long as Hamas is in power, and as long as Hamas was not humiliated enough and is not ready to bend his head and to come to Cairo asking for help, then for Egypt it will be okay if Israel goes on invading Gaza and in the attempt to eliminate Hamas, not in a political way, but in a military way. This is an option. I haven't heard that this option was erased from the table, of the Israeli table. So this is in the best interest of Egypt to see Hamas eliminated, and in the context of what we heard just now, to see the Palestinian Authority, the sole representative of the Palestinian people, taking responsibility also over the Gaza Strip. We have to remember that since 7 years ago, we heard on a daily basis the slogan, the PLO is the sole representative of the Palestinian people. For the last 6 or 7 years, we don't hear it anymore. And why is it?
So we will start talking about that. We will just continue talking about that. Why?
Just one sentence. If
we're here for half an hour, and you will say it. Yes.
If Netanyahu is happy with the status quo, the Egyptians will not accept it. Sure. They want the Palestinian Authority in Gaza.
Sure.
Oh, but I will open this just in a short while with you. I just want to go to the Gaza border with our I-24 News correspondent, Shai Ben-Ari. Good evening, Shai. So other than, of course, the Egyptians and the Israelis and the Palestinians who are counting down, the people in the south of Israel are also counting down and waiting for 12 Jerusalem time to see whether they will hear the sirens again and will have to go back to the shelters.
Yes, Lucy, certainly everybody is counting down, including we reporters who are basically waiting to see, what happens when the clock strikes midnight. Basically, there's a number of different options when you talk about what happens after. We could perhaps even hear news from Cairo. We could see perhaps even yet another extension of this current ceasefire. And of course, the option of a simple resumption of hostilities still remains on the table. That may happen at midnight. It may happen even earlier. That was actually the case when the last ceasefire was counted down. That was last Thursday. We were here, and we saw 2 hours before the official end of the ceasefire, we saw a number of rockets fired more or less from the area behind me, Sajaiya, in our direction. About 8 rockets were fired through the course of the night, and despite of all of that, another ceasefire was announced, an extension basically of 5 days, which has brought us to this current point. I wouldn't be surprised if that scenario repeats itself in some sort of fashion tonight. That seems to be the sort of reality we are living in. But of course, there are all sorts of options, and we'll just have to update you as the situation develops.
Yes, not only the people in the south are counting down, you are also counting down to see if you're going back to the border back again. Shai Ben-Ari, thank you very, very much for this. And before we're continuing to discuss this matter, our correspondent Shai Ben-Ari takes a look at the current picture with the current truce soon to expire.
Mere hours before the expiration of a 5-day ceasefire, it remains unclear exactly what will happen after the clock strikes midnight on Monday night in both Israel and Gaza. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is set to meet with Hamas leader Khalid Mashal in Qatar in the coming hours in an effort to advance a last-minute resolution to the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Representatives from both sides were back in Cairo Sunday evening as talks resumed following 3 days of internal consultations among the respective leaderships. It is clear, though, that significant gaps still need to be bridged, with the sides nowhere near agreement on issues like the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip and the construction of a seaport in Gaza, among others. Indeed, a senior Israeli official told I-24 News that a deal before midnight local time was not likely. Egyptian mediators have suggested announcing an indefinite ceasefire and delaying the thornier issues for talks to be held at a later stage. Israel is open to this possibility, but Hamas leaders have claimed there will be no extension of the current ceasefire without what it could present as a major achievement.
We want a deal that satisfies the Palestinian people, so we confirm that Hamas is ready for all the options. The ball is now in the Israel court. Hamas's position will be according to what the Israeli side decides.
If no agreement or ceasefire extension is agreed, the resumption of hostilities remains a possibility, but Israel has claimed it has no intention of letting the situation develop into a war of attrition, promising a forceful reaction to any fire emerging from the Strip. Another realistic scenario is one where a familiar balance emerges yet again, one based on mutual deterrence and characterized by relative but very temporary calm. In effect, a return to the fragile state of affairs that has existed on and off for years now along the Israel-Gaza border. If this scenario is indeed realized, it is likely that some difficult questions will soon follow.
So yes, you gentlemen put some things on the table. Is it in Israel's benefit? Is it in Israel's benefit? Is it in Egypt's benefit? And you said something that Israel wants to keep Hamas in the Gaza Strip so it will have someone to blame?
To some extent, yes. To some extent, in the strategic decision between strengthening Abbas or strengthening Hamas, I think that Netanyahu would prefer not to strengthen Abbas, because strengthening Abbas means international pressure to resume negotiations, something which he cannot, at this political point of time, afford.
What is Israel right now ignoring? Is Israel ignoring the let's say, the window of opportunity that it has on the table right now? Because we see from one side Saudi Arabia and Egypt and the Emirates, the United Emirates, Arab Emirates, and from the other side we see Turkey and Qatar. And from one other side, totally other, it's Iran, who is just waiting and watching everything that is happening here. And we have Israel. What Israel is missing on this new table, new Middle East table?
At this moment, Israel is not missing any opportunity. The
To miss an opportunity.
To miss an opportunity.
well,
I didn't tell her what to say.
right, I take the challenge. At this moment, we are at war, and the opportunity might develop at the one moment after the war. And what you have just suggested about Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, and Jordan, of course, led by Egypt, the pragmatic Arab countries that are giving the blowing wind in the back of the Egyptians against Hamas. After the war, when it will be cleared who is against whom with Gaza, at what position Abu Mazen finds himself vis-à-vis the Hamas, only then the Israeli government might consider using an opportunity that has developed during the war, during the operation.
But then Israel maybe will find another excuse to Mahmoud Abbas not to sit down, not to tell him that, okay, take control of the Gaza Strip.
Let's be fair. Mahmoud Abbas must, it is obligatory that Mahmoud Abbas gets out of this operation, of this conflict, stronger than he was before. If he feels uncertain,
will he?
Not strong, hard to say.
Well, because it seems that Israel is doing everything that it can to make him weaker.
Leave aside Israel. The point is to what extent Abu Mazen will position himself vis-à-vis Hamas, vis-à-vis the jihadists, vis-à-vis his opposition. The Palestinians at this moment, neither in Cairo, not in Qatar, they are not speaking in one language. Between them, among themselves. They have to speak, to come to the table after the operation, after the war, speaking the same language, the same Arabic or English, and putting their arguments in a strong way from a certainty, not weakness, as it was before. The fact is that till now, Abu Mazen was unreliable in the eyes of Netanyahu and the government, and rightly so. He was not strong enough in his.
I think that Moti is moving a little bit uncomfortable in his chair.
Well, that's my nature, you know. Let me make 3 points. One semi-political and two really negotiation. The first is that we are in a war, but I think that Ambassador Shaked is right. We are no longer in the military war. We are in a diplomatic and PR war, because the immense pressure put diplomatically and the BDS movement against Israel will hurt or will harm Israel's national interest more than the military outcomes of this fight. I'm now going to point number 2, which is the controlling the process. This is something that Israel didn't learn since the since the Second Lebanon War. There's always, we already see a pattern that the military forces, Israel IDF forces, gain dramatic military achievements. They are supported in the first 7 days, 8 days, 10 days with political support. They benefit political support. They benefit political Arab support. And then we lose it. We lose it because we don't know how to conduct in parallel a diplomatic initiative, to put together a proposal, not to wait sequential to the end of the hostilities before putting a ceasefire or a proposal. I am confident that if Israel would have been coordinated with the Egyptian, not the first Egyptian proposal, it was really premature. But later on, after the Sajaiya was completely turned down by the Israeli forces, if Israel and Egypt, supported by the Saudi and the access that Ambassador Shaked spoke about, that would have maybe not brought Hamas to his knees, but definitely forced Hamas to accept at that point.
So, when we sat down today before we entered the studio and we started this day, we asked ourselves, what is the headline of the day? What is the main issue that we want to talk about? And maybe we tried to summon it because we're waiting for the deadline at midnight. We said 3, 2, 1.
Was it Rabin who said in the Middle East no holy dates?
Yeah, no, exactly.
No
so we said to ourselves, maybe it's a 3, 2, 1, poof, question mark. Is it going to explode in whose face? Is it going to explode in the Egyptians' face? Is it going to explode in Israel's face? Is it going to explode in, personally, Benjamin Netanyahu's face that actually got a lot of, we can say, international support in this operation? Unlike any other operations, he got also some kind of a inner support from the Israeli public. Is this bubble going to explode in someone's face at midnight?
Not at midnight, because I don't know whether journalists or the binary hysteric nature of the Israeli public wants clear cuts whether it's going to explode. No, we learn through this operation there is this what we call complex dynamic system or self-organizing system. Things are going different than the commentators, than experts. Things are developed because of dynamics that we're not fully aware of. Things develop in tremendous different directions. It's not going to explode. It's going to change, to move. They might fire 1, 2, Israeli might strike back, but there is now a strong power, which is General Assisi.
What you are saying, basically, is that no one was ready, and now the area, the zone, the two states, everyone, the Palestinians and the Israelis, are more ready to reach an agreement than ever. Maybe?
Who are the Palestinians?
Could be. Depends on some elements that will come out of Cairo. For instance, Egypt has nothing to lose if it explodes at midnight or if there is an agreement, signature or not. Egypt can wait. They are not in a hurry. Now, it depends a lot not on the Hamas, but on Abu Mazen and Israel. Abu Mazen, from the extent that if he will miss the chance, if he will not put a challenge in front of the Prime Minister of Israel, as it was in the days of Sadat, for instance, or King Hussein of Jordan, to put a challenge and to see how the Israeli Prime Minister takes it.
Who's this time going to put the challenge? Just before we're moving to this, I want to go live to Ashkelon, where our I-24 News correspondent Shahar Pellet is standing by. And Shahar, you asked today the people in the south how they feel. Are they worried? Well, what are the answers that you got today?
Yes, good evening, Lucy. Well, it's been a relatively calm day and, in fact, a calm week here in the southern city of Ashkelon. But despite that, we've talked to the residents here who have expressed fears and concerns towards the ending of the ceasefire tonight. Some say they don't even leave their homes once they know that the ceasefire is about to end, which is an ongoing event in the past week. They stay in their homes and they very much fear from an escalation and more rockets being fired at them. We're now in the center of the city, behind us the Central Mall, which is actually packed with people. So they are trying to continue with their lives as normally as possible. But once again, concerns are grave. And the military is also very much alert and very much prepared. Today, the railway between Ashkelon and the southern city of Sderot has been cancelled in fears of rockets being fired towards the train, causing a very big terror attack. And so military sources are very much afraid that small militant groups from the Gaza Strip, not affiliated with Hamas, will try and escalate the situation and even fire rockets and mortars before the ending of the ceasefire. So also the military is very much alert.
Yes, Shahal Peled, thank you very much for this. You said something. So who is winning?
Yeah, you know, even if there is a security decision to stop this line between Ashkelon and Sderot, I would have take the risk to do it tomorrow or in 2 days. Because now, this is, for example, a decision that Hamas is taking as a huge victory. One of their propaganda, one of the narratives about their victory is that they managed to block Israel air traffic, okay? Which lasted like 24 hours, even less. When we conduct this war, we have to bear in mind that it's also a narrative war. And if Netanyahu is so strong against Hamas, he has to take into consideration all these actions, because on one hand, he declares, Israel will retaliate, etc., etc., and Bogi Yalon, repeat these threats or warning. And at the same time, deeds, which in the region are stronger than words, deeds are cancellation of this train line.
Before I will finish with you, I want to show you, we asked the Israelis, what do you think is going to happen at midnight? Let's see.
I hope midnight will be quiet and that we find a solution and we stop all of these wars.
I think fighting will continue after midnight because we asked for a ceasefire and the organization in Gaza did not respect that and tried to hurt us.
I hope and I believe that the fighting will stop and hopefully there will be not just a ceasefire but a lasting peace agreement.
The only thing I can say is that I truly hope it stays as it is today and not all sides, especially on the other side on Israel, understand the meaning behind it. And all we can hope is the very best for everybody on both sides.
Hoping.
Yes, we live in an area full of
I
hopes.
stopped you in the idea of the challenge, so you wanted to continue.
I would say that the day after, tomorrow morning, whatever the results in Cairo are, I think this is the waltz that two leaders must take part in, and they are not Hamas and not Egypt. It is Netanyahu and Abu Mazen.
And you know what I'm going to call it?
If Abu Mazen, I said he must get out strong.
I have 20 seconds. I have 20 seconds. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Half an hour just passed.
It was a pleasure.
Like that. Thank you very much. We're going out for a small break. 2 minutes. If you want to see the challenge, come tomorrow as well. Don't go anywhere. Countdown to the end of the truce hours before the 5-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is to expire. As part of the efforts, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is set to meet with Hamas's political head Khalid Mash'al in Qatar. In Iraq, Kurdish forces step up their offensive against the Islamic State, backed by U.S. warplanes. Iraq's security spokesman says the Mosul Dam has been completely liberated from the Sunni extremist group. And the strife surrounding the murder of the Missouri teen Michael Brown continues as the state's governor says the National Guard asks the National Guard to help bring calm back to Ferguson. Yes, and we're back to Iraq. Boosted by 2 days of U.S. airstrikes, Iraqi and Kurdish forces have managed to take back full control of the country's largest dam from Islamic militants. But the fight is nowhere near over. I-24 News correspondent Ayman Siksik has more.
Islamic State militants suffered their first crucial setback Monday morning as the Mosul Dam was reclaimed by Kurdish forces. The operation to take back the dam was the most highly coordinated among U.S., Kurdish, and Iraqi forces since American troops left Iraq in late 2011.
We are fighting a strong terrorist state, fully developed terrorists who have advanced weapons.
Combatants of the Islamic State had seized the dam on August 7th, hoping for a prolonged hold of the strategic facilities. But 15 airstrikes were launched by the U.S. near the dam in Mosul on Sunday in aims to assist the Kurdish ground offensive to recapture it.
ISIL cannot control any of our positions because they are strangers and they are deprived of anything related to humanity. Those are criminals.
President Barack Obama said in a letter to Congress Sunday, the failure of the Mosul Dam could threaten the lives of large numbers of civilians, threaten U.S. personnel and facilities, including the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, and prevent the Iraqi government from providing critical services to the Iraqi population. However, for Iraqis in the Mosul and the region, it may be too early to celebrate, as a U.S. defense official added that the military assaults in the city are scheduled to continue until the Kurdish forces retake the dam completely.
And we right now from Erbil, Iraq, is freelance journalist Hermione G. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Hermione, what is the feeling in Erbil after the Peshmerga forces managed to push back the ISIL from the Mosul Dam?
Well, obviously, people here are very relieved. It was a very, very concerning situation that the jihadists were in control of the dam, given that it could potentially have been used as a, weapon of mass destruction. So people are relieved. People are very glad that the U.S. is coming in. We're hearing about France and other countries now sending aid. And Britain today, we heard, are going to be doing more than simply participating at a humanitarian level. So I think everybody here is relieved to see that finally they are getting some of the international support that they've been demanding. Erbil itself is fairly calm. We're seeing an increased number of security forces on the streets and so on. But other than that, it's fairly peaceful. Obviously, we have huge numbers of internally displaced people arriving in the city as well, which is very difficult situation for everybody.
Hermione, you spend time with the Kurdish forces. What is the feeling among them about supporting the United States in this fight?
Well, they're very grateful for the support that the U.S. has provided so far. They keep saying that they need more strikes, they need them more often. They would love to have soldiers, American soldiers on the ground, but I think everybody understands that that will not happen. And the other thing they desperately need are weapons. As we've heard, some weapons have arrived in Iraq, but the people I was speaking to an artillery commander down in Mahmour, where they are trying to defend the town against the militants after having retaken it. They were saying, we keep hearing about weapons arriving, but we've yet to see a single bullet. And the weapons they were using when I was there were left over from 2003, apparently. So they're very grateful for the support they're getting, but they desperately want more.
Hermione, do you hear some kind of a criticism against the United States for leaving leaving Iraq and maybe not understanding the region very good, not understanding the divisions between the Kurds and the Shiites and the Sunnis, for maybe leaving them and not managing this entire, let's say, this entire situation in a good, manageable way?
People will definitely say, that they owe us. The U.S. owes us, Britain owes us, because they helped create the situation. And, they're obviously referring to 2003. In some cases, they're also referring to, the initial divisions of the Middle East and the Kurdistan region, close to 100 years ago. So, that's what people do point the finger to that extent. Certainly, when they were leaving, people in Kurdistan were extremely worried about what would happen when the U.S. forces left. And unfortunately, they've been proven to be right to be concerned.
Yes, Hermione, thank you very, very much for this talk with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and we're moving to Libya. The unrest in Libya continues. Today, 6 people were killed in a rocket attack targeting positions of an Islamist-led militia in the capital, Tripoli. This comes while different Libyan factions trade gunfire and shells in various parts of Tripoli, ignoring international appeals for a ceasefire. More in the report by Inab Halabi and Eli Ochenberg.
A grave deterioration in the state of affairs in Libya is causing growing concerns over the country's political future. The latest round of violence saw armed forces in Tripoli shelling targets near the city's international port. Tensions have risen again today following strikes on unidentified warplanes seen overhead in Tripoli. The warplanes are estimated to have been headed for rank grade General Khalifa Haftar, who has used some aircraft from an airbase under his control in Benghazi to attack militant Islamists. In July this year, a new United Nations diplomat was deployed to the region, but this recent escalation has forced the world body to evacuate all of its representatives from the country. According to some observers, these latest events only emphasize the failure of Western involvement in Libya, though 3 years have passed since the regime of Muammar Gaddafi was brought to an end. No sustainable alternatives have been introduced to the region. The Libyan government now hopes that this increase in violence will raise global awareness of the need for international involvement in the country and for the protection of its citizens and parliamentary institutions.
And if we will be back just half an hour ago about what we talked between the ceasefire between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So Palestinian sources are just saying, sources report that a ceasefire agreement will be announced shortly. A ceasefire agreement will be announced shortly. Maybe yes, maybe no. We will, of course, wait and we will report the rest of the news to you. And we're continuing with the United States. The small American town of Ferguson, Missouri is still in flames as police once again fired smoke canisters to clear protesters from the streets, driving in armored vehicles and putting under scrutiny the increasing militarization of America's local police forces. I-24 News correspondent Shahal Peled has the story.
The Ferguson, Missouri clashes continue as overnight police fired smoke canisters into a crowd of about 400 demonstrators, including families with children, who were protesting against the killing of an unarmed teenager by police last week.
They just want what anybody else would want if their children were shot down in broad daylight. A fair and impartial investigation.
18-year-old Brown, who was African American, was shot by white police officer Darren Wilson. The police department in the St. Louis suburb has come under strong criticism for both the death of an unarmed man and for its handling of the aftermath.
Police are not soldiers. So why, in this photo from Ferguson, are they wearing fucking camo? They are northwest of St. Louis, not northwest of the Amazon. If they want to blend in with their surroundings, they should be dressed as a dollar store.
But police in Ferguson said they faced coordinated attacks, including from guns and firebombs, as they tried to quell the violence.
Police were shot at. Makeshift barricades were set up to block police. Bottles and rockets were thrown at police. Based on these conditions, I had no alternative but to elevate the level of our response.
After imposing a midnight curfew for the second night in a row in the tense St. Louis suburb, authorities are now seeking to secure an elusive peace as the town of Ferguson becomes the site of ongoing racially charged daily protests.
Yes, and joining me right now from St. Louis is Andrew Raffold, CEO of the Jewish Federation of St. Louis. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Andrew, we know it's the United States. We know that it's 2014, but really, was it a really big surprise, this whole tension that we're seeing on the streets?
Well, the particulars are, of course, surprising and unexpected. An 18-year-old who was reported to have been unarmed was shot, apparently multiple times in the back. And first off, let's just be clear that the reaction has been peaceful and respectful, most of it. Community members in the hundreds, if not thousands, are protesting nonviolently and showing up in support of the community. And you have law enforcement professionals who are keeping the peace in a responsible way, putting themselves on the front line every day. But is the reaction unexpected? Well, there are a number of things. Number one, as your report just said, the militarization of the police is striking people, many people, as an overreaction and raising grave concerns. But if you think about it in terms that you and your viewers can understand, you can think about the African American community in the United States as in some ways parallel to Israeli Arabs today. You have a population that feels systematically disenfranchised, they're excluded from mainstream economic and political opportunities to advance their interest. They're discriminated of, or at least perceived to be, because of who they are. There's a history of oppression that their lives have been built upon as well. Now add to that a catalyzing event, this killing of a young man who appears to have been innocent, although the facts are still being learned, and a police force that, as we said, seems to be over-militarized, and you have an explosion. It doesn't exclude anyone's actions who are rioting or police who are acting wrong. But is it sudden? Yes and no.
You know, what you're saying is pretty amazing, because you're saying that it was there, it's been there, the writing is on the wall, everybody's talking about this, but no one, we know that there is an African-American president in the United States, but no one is actually dealing with this problem that actually is burning inside the United States community and society.
I think racism continues to be systematically problematic in ways that it's hard for us to see, when it's right in front of us. In many ways, the laws on the books, as well as the society, is open and free. And again, it's very much like Israel about that. But then there are still persistent economic inequalities, persistent inequalities of education and opportunity, and they build up and they create two separate societies in a sense. It's not everywhere, but in St. Louis particularly, it does seem to be a little more intense, and in different communities you have more integration.
So how do you exactly, what do you hear from people right now in the last 48 hours on the streets? How do they feel about this?
Well, I think what you're seeing, and the fact that you're interested in is the same thing that's happening here. There's a great deal of interest and a great deal of concern for our region and for the state of things. And I think that this can become an event that catalyzes people to change, to recognize that discrimination, that separateness, that racism, as well as the need to move everyone to act responsibly when there's conflict, because there are multiple explanations that it can move that conversation ahead. And there's just a lot of concern in the community and a lot of sadness and really desire to help.
It's amazing how much Israelis want to look like Americans, and it's amazing how they do, in not in the good ways, but in the bad ways. Andrew Rayfold, you don't agree?
No, I think Israel is a pluralist democracy that on the books has the kind of legal infrastructure and commitment to free speech, to economic and political opportunities. What we're talking about in both cases, if you want to draw the parallel, really is persistent social impediments to doing that, to treating everyone equally, to really making sure we live in societies that are equal.
Yes, definitely. Andrew Rayfold, thank you very, very much for this conversation with us. Thank you very much. And we're moving to Ukraine. Ukrainian forces have moved into outskirts of a rebel-held Luhansk, where basic supplies are running out. Ukrainian military says that several people died when rockets and mortars hit vehicles moving refugees out of the Luhansk area of eastern Ukraine. I-24 News correspondent Uri Shapira has more on the fragile situation.
The political situation between Russia and Ukraine is once again moving in two different directions. Some progress has been made in the political arena, but violence continues on the ground. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Tuesday that during the special conference held in Berlin with foreign ministers from both countries, his country has made some headway with Ukraine on the issue of the Russian humanitarian aid convoy.
We can declare that all the issues, many of which were artificially imposed, regarding us, about 300 trucks with humanitarian aid, were resolved. The agreement has been reached with the Ukrainian side as well as with the International Committee of the Red Cross.
In the meantime, Ukrainian officials have accused pro-Russian rebels of attacking civilians in a rocket attack that hit a refugee convoy in the eastern region.
Today at 9:40 a.m., terrorists committed a bloody crime near Luhansk. Terrorists fired at a column of civilians who were trying to flee the zone of military actions for multiple Grad missiles complex and mortars that were handed by the Russian Federation. A lot of people died, including women and children.
German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier said a political solution is still far from being reached, but perhaps the talking itself and the minor progress that has been made so far signals a small step towards a resolution in this endless crisis in the region.
And now, let's talk some money. Economy. Yes, money, but not in a good way. The spread of Ebola continues to shake West Africa in the latest blow to the efforts to stop it. 17 Ebola patients in Liberia fled from the quarantine center after it was attacked Sunday. And joining me right now to look at the economic implications of the virus and the panic it's spreading from our economy magazine is Danielle Roth. Good evening.
How's it going?
Thank you very much for coming. So how is it affecting? How does the medicine, a virus, is affecting us economically?
Well, the virus is slated to have a huge effect. Just late last week, Moody's said that we should expect big transportation cuts, big kind of breaches in industry systems. When you look at something like SARS that happened 11 years ago in summer of 2003, 800 people died from that and 8,000 people were infected. That cost the global economy something like $50 billion, according to most reports. $50 billion for that. Now, over 1,000 people have already died in West Africa. So you're talking about already an effect that will have a spiraling out of control impact on the global economy.
So where's it coming from, like the $50 billion that you're talking about?
Well, so it's kind of like a domino effect. Once there's panic, people stop traveling. Airlines stop flying there already. We've seen British Airways, for example, stop flights to certain destinations. You see vendors closing. You see clubs closing. You see banks closing early. People stop going to work. Truck drivers stop delivering deliveries. Everything slowly shuts down from the initial panic that comes from something, again, that actually, in the case of SARS in 2003, only killed less than 800 people. Only, it's a cold thing to say, but it's in the global scheme of things, it's not a global image the way you imagine it.
Yeah, it's one way or another. It's a small number if you cannot count human lives, but it is if we want to count it in some other places. Is there any kind of a solution? The world is preparing some kind of solution to this situation?
Yeah.
Economically?
So right now, actually, one of the interesting effects this is going to have, Washington Post report was talking about the changes to the pharmaceutical industry. It takes right now something like 14 years for including 6 years of trials for medicines to get out there, vaccines to get out there, $2 billion it usually costs. Now they're looking at a 6-month timeline to try to get some products out that can curb the spread of this. So there are solutions in the works, and some of those solutions will probably have far-reaching effects on global industry like pharmaceuticals, pushing things to come out faster. And as we see disease and climate change kind of taking effect.
Who will gain from this situation? The pharmaceutical.
Well, this is one area certainly. And I think one of the lessons that we learn is to kind of let panic be realistic. Like we said, hundreds of people dead is a massive tragedy, but let's, keep the panic kind of within the bounds of where it belongs and allow for economies and health ministries to deal in an honest and slow, calm way.
Yes, Daniel Roth, thank you very, very much for this. 3 members of the Arab-Israeli political party Balad took a trip in the last several days to Qatar. The visit has prompted calls from the right-wing parties in the Israeli parliament to ban Balad party and investigate the trip. I-24 News correspondent Eli Ochenberg has more.
While the struggle between Israel and Hamas continues, the political fighting in Jerusalem steps up. After its 3 legislators flew to Qatar, Israeli Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman says Monday that Balad party should no longer be allowed in the parliament and that its members should be investigated for visiting Hamas's sponsor country. Balad opposes the idea of Israel as a solely Jewish state and supports the 2-state solution and a return to the 1967 borders. The party also advocates Israel recognizing Palestinian Arabs as a national minority. The Balad spokesman did not confirm or deny reports that the 3 legislators met in Qatar with Balad founder Azmi Bshara, who resigned from the parliament in 2007 and fled from Israel while under investigation for giving information to Hezbollah during the Second Lebanon War. Lieberman said his party, Israel Beiteinu, will continue doing whatever it can to ensure the 5th column representing terrorist organizations in the parliament will find its place far from our House of Representatives and behind bars. Lieberman also called on Attorney General Yehuda Weinstein to check where the funds for the Qatar trip came from, as well as whether the trip itself was legal and if the legislators broke any Israeli security laws, such as contact with a foreign agent. Recently, the Balad members were involved in other incidents which stirred controversy. One of its most outspoken parliamentarians, Hanin Zouabi, was investigated by the police last week for alleged incitement to violence and insulting a public worker and was banned by Parliament's Ethics Committee from all parliamentary activity except voting for 6 months. Another party member, Basil Gattas, held a minute of silence in the parliamentary plenum in honor of the Palestinian victims in Gaza. And as it seems for now, it probably will not be the last time the Balad members are stirring major controversy.
And after 2 years in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has suggested he will be leaving the premises of the embassy soon. I-24 News correspondent Or Shapir has more.
After 2 years of living inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is expected to leave his political asylum, which provided him refuge from criminal charges.
I am leaving the embassy soon.
Reports in the British media suggest that Assange's heart condition forced him to take the risky decision. Despite his disapproval of the British media, he admitted to them today that he has health difficulties.
It is an environment in which any healthy person would find themselves soon enough with certain difficulties.
In 2010, Assange and his leaking WikiLeaks website gained world recognition when tens of thousands of classified documents were released on the internet and other top media. Subsequently, it has been found that Assange's source for the mass of information was Private Bradley Manning, an American soldier who served as an intelligence analyst. Manning, a transgender who's now called Chelsea, was last year jailed for 35 years, while the Australian Assange managed to manipulate the authorities until he was given political asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in 2012. For many, Assange is a true hero of freedom of speech. For others, he is a danger. It is not clear yet what will happen next to the famous whistleblower who inspired many others and became an iconic figure. Be it a jail or another political asylum, at least in the short term, it is unlikely that Assange will find a safe ground.
Let's go for a run. And with me, I'm not going for a run. With me now is the host of I-24 News Sports Weekend Magazine, Milas Lavir. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm good. A bit too hot out for a run, though.
Yeah, no, it's been a long day. Not now. Tomorrow morning.
I agree.
Not. So let's talk about Federer.
Starting with Roger Federer, won his 6th title in Cincinnati last night, U.S. time, overnight for us. Amazing accomplishment for him. He's made it to the final of Cincinnati 6 times. He's won every single time. And this is his 80th title overall, which is an amazing accomplishment. Now, he came in, he played against David Ferrer, which for him is just an easy win. They played each other 16 times, 16 matches. He's never lost to David Ferrer. He's only lost 5 sets to David Ferrer, which is unbelievable. So Roger Federer making a name for himself. He already had a name for himself. He's establishing his legacy even more. And he said, he's been in a slump the past couple weeks. And he said to himself when he raised that trophy, I've been raising all the small ones lately. It's nice to finally raise one of the big ones again. The other surprise is last night, Serena Williams. She, in 6 tries, she only won her first title in Cincinnati yesterday, which for her is an amazing feat. I mean, coming in on an 0-5 record, it's pretty incredible to finally go out with a win. It's definitely a confidence boost for her.
So it was a good tournament.
It was a good tournament. I mean, it helped them a lot coming into this. Rafael Nadal was out with an injury, and Novak Djokovic had a really rough week. He was out in his 2nd game, so that definitely helped Roger Federer win this 6th title.
And let's move to talk about Marc Marquez.
Marc Marquez, MotoGP. He lost for the first time this season. He was going for 11 straight records wins, and he cut it short at 10. He came in pole position, but he didn't even end up on the podium. He was in top of 3. He came in 4th, but that's a little scratch for him, minor. He has such a huge lead with his 10 wins so far in the season that coming in 4th does nothing for his record overall. So he's still sitting pretty at the top of the podium. And it says a lot. Danny Pedrosa, who's actually won the title, no one's really talking about him because people are more interested in Marc Marquez actually losing for the first time.
Marav Sevilla, you haven't seen me on a motorcycle yet.
Yet. Keyword.
Yes. And probably no one
it.
will ever see me on a motorcycle riding like that. Marav Sevilla, thank you very much for this. We're going out for a small break, and then we will be back for the Daily Debate. Don't go anywhere. 2 minutes. I'll be back.